Helena Petrovna Blavatsky was born in 1831 in Russia. She was an enormous literary, philosophic, and great intellect of the 19th century, wrote several books, and was the founder of the Theosophical Society. She, from childhood, had seen visions and dreams of a master Maurya, who was a Rajput prince, who eventually she met when she was just 20 years old in London, when she saw him in a procession in Hyde Park in 1851. There, when she met him personally, he told her that her destiny lay in India, but not now, after 20 or 30 years, and he asked her to go and see the country. She is very little known in the world today, but if you research her books, there are many PDFs available of her books, and several books are available online. Many of her stories are much easier to read than her non-fiction books, and people would be advised to start with her non-fiction books before her non-fiction. Now, she was known as an occultist, someone with unusual psychic gifts, and in the literature, it is said that she, in her earlier incarnation, was an Italian occultist called Cagliostro, who also had a lot of opposition from the church and lot of infamy, but had unusual powers and was an extraordinary person too. Now, HPB, born in a royal family, was a very mischievous girl. From a young age, she had certain psychic gifts. She was also a great friend for everybody, yet she spoke her mind honestly, and that made people uncomfortable. She spoke and told them exactly what she thought of them. As a child, she was a very unusual child. She was full of naughtiness, and probably at one point, some maid in the household might have been a bit strict with her, and she whacked the maid. Now, her grandmother, with whom she lived because she had lost her mother, and her father was in the army, a colonel in the army, the grandmother told the child that she must apologize to the maid. She lined up all the maids and servants of the house and told Helena to apologize to the to the maid. And the child was embarrassed, full red, but she tearfully kissed the hands of the maid. And the grandmother told her that some servant or maid who had earned the love and trust of a family should not be treated like this. So Helena said later that it was a great lesson in doing justice to those whose social rank prevented them from just retaliation. There were many such stories about her which can be read in the literature. Her great grandfather had a library full of occult literature, which she read avidly. Those days, the occult literature was connected to alchemy. And even as a 15-year-old, she was very curious about these things. Those days, there was no schools for children, and mostly she was homeschooled. But she had an English tutor, so she knew English a little. She says in a letter to Prince Dundakov, one of the persons she used to write to, I was in search for the unknown. The philosopher's stone symbolizes the transmutation of the lower animal nature of man into the highest and divine. So, this kind of a quest was always there in her. In our literature, it says that once a person becomes a chela of a master, the master always keeps an eye on her. So, the master Maurya, whom she later met in 1851, had been keeping an eye on her from childhood. And there are examples of how he saved her from physical danger also while she was doing horse riding, and other times she was saved by him. So there is she was an extraordinary traveler. Even with her father in 1844 and 45, she went to France and Germany. Eventually, she on a bet which she took with a maid who said nobody would marry someone as willful and independent as her. She took a bet that she will even get and the maid told her that you will not even be able to get this Blavatsky, who's a 40-year-old man, to propose to her, leave alone a young man. So, age of 18, she took up the bet, and within 3 days, she got this Blavatsky, who was an old man, to marry her. He proposed, and she could not refuse. That was a condition of that situation, and she ended up marrying him. The marriage was a failure from day one. She wanted to escape, and she finally escaped within a few months of the marriage without any consummation. She escaped to Athens in 1848 and Egypt, where she traveled. She went to Paris and Europe around that. And in 1851, as you saw, she was in London also. Right after meeting that master, she, instead of going to India, which he told her to go and see the country, she went to uh, America, to New Orleans, Texas, Mexico. And a year later, she goes to Bombay. And another year later, she tries to enter Tibet, but she is unable to. That's where she thought he was. And she was unable to. The English government at that time prevented her from entering Tibet. So she returns back to America, and once more, she tries to enter Tibet, this time via uh, Lahore and Leh Ladakh. This time she enters Tibet, but she doesn't get to meet the master. She goes to the west side. The masters live in the east side. Again, once more, she travels via Southeast Asia, again back to London, etc. So, as you see in this list, and then this is the second list, she has extensively traveled. Finally, 14 years later, she manages to enter Tibet and then spends 2 years with the master Maurya, after which she travels once more to Europe and then returns back again to the ashram in Tibet, where she meets the other master, Master Kutumi, and then travels once more via Egypt to other parts of the world, to Europe all over again, and then to England and to America. So there is a lot of travel that she did. We will look at. She finally died in London in 1891, just a 60-year-old, 60 years of life. And in this period, how much literature she has written, extraordinary books which are still in print and are still being read all over the world. We will see. So she was a very, very kind soul. She always was caring for the underprivileged. When the first time in 1852, when she had to go from England, from in 1851, when she went from England to America, she had a first class ticket. Her father was always sponsoring her all her travels and monetarily took care of her. She had a first class ticket to England, to from England to America, and she saw this poor mother with two children who had been swindled of her tickets, who was to join her husband in America and was sitting outside the ship on the docks. She felt very sorry. She didn't have the money to buy tickets for that woman and her children. So she exchanged her first class ticket for four steerage tickets. And she traveled for 2 weeks in the steerage area of the ship, which is like our third class compartment of Indian Railway, without any windows, no light, extremely stinky, and no proper place to lie down, sitting and traveling in this steerage of a ship. That's how kind and generous a soul she was. She did that for someone she doesn't even know. Now, HPB had some very unique gifts, which is why that our masters chose her. There were three main reasons. Firstly, she could communicate astrally with her master in her thoughts, and the masters could communicate with her directly wherever she was. Secondly, she had the gift of reading the Akashic records, which is the entire complete history of everything that has ever happened to humanity and in the universe. So that record she could actually read. She had that psychic gift. And thirdly, her mother too had been a writer. Her mother was reputed to be as good a writer as Jane Austen in Russia. Her grandmother was a scientist. So she had these literary and intellectual skills to write the complex ideas of the master later on. So these were the three reasons she was a chosen one. She also had other psychic gifts, which also were in display right through childhood. Now, when she came to America, that was a time in America when, not just in America, but in England and in Europe, spiritualism was in vogue. Spiritualism was the calling of the dead spirits, also communicating with them with astral forms of the medium. And she says that about this, that when she went to America, she says, I am here in this country sent by my lodge on behalf of truth in modern spiritualism. And it is my most sacred duty to unveil what is and expose what is not. Perhaps I arrive here 100 years too soon, for people seem to care every day less for truth and every hour more for gold. And so my feeble protest and endeavors will be of no avail. So, at this time, spiritualism, which was in vogue, was so popular that even the American president, Abraham Lincoln, used to communicate with spirits, though they say that he had a good guide spirit. So, this type of mirage, to break the mirage of spiritualism, was not easy. And that's when she met Henry Steele Olcott, the other founder of the Theosophical Society. Now, the masters had clearly told her that she had to go to this place called the Eddy Farm, where one farmer, Eddy, was manifesting some ghosts, and those ghosts were visible to people. And Olcott, who was also researching spiritualism, was writing articles in the newspaper on spiritualism, was investigating those that phenomena. So when HPP went to this Eddy Farm, and she tried to explain and communicate to Olcott, explaining to him what that phenomena of ghosts were. She said this about Olcott. She said, I found Olcott in love with spirits. I was ordered to let him know that spiritual phenomena, without the philosophy of occultism, were dangerous and misleading. I proved to him that all that mediums could do through spirits, others could do at will without any spirits at all. That bells and thought reading, raps, and physical phenomena could be achieved by anyone who had a faculty of acting in his physical body through the organs of his astral body. And I had that faculty ever since I was 4 years old, as all my family know. I could make furniture move and objects fly apparently, and my astral arms that supported them remained invisible. Now, Henry Steele Olcott was a very well known person there. He was a lawyer, and he was one among the three people who was asked to investigate Abraham Lincoln's murder. He had also other achievements in agriculture. He had developed forms of agriculture. He had written a lot. He was a very well known figure. So to convince him was not easy. He himself was an astute investigator. When in HPV's presence, ghosts of new types appeared in the farm, HPV explained to Olcott that she herself was molding the astral body emitted by the farmer Eddy to whatever shape she wanted. It was never a departed soul, always a form in the mind of anyone present there. So that was exactly what was happening in that Eddy farm. And he got convinced of what was happening there. Of course, she also taught him about shells of astral bodies left behind by the dead who go to the higher planes. So again, those shells are not the actual person who's died, but the remnant of a dead person. So eventually, she managed to convince Olcott of the reality of spiritualism, and thus they began the Theosophical Society in 1875. Now, her books, The Secret Doctrine in 3 volumes, Isis Unveiled in 2 volumes, The Voice of Silence, which is a small book, The Key to Theosophy, which is a good beginner's book to read about theosophy. And she was also the editor of Lucifer, the Lightbringer, of which she produced 120 issues, and Theosophist, which is still in publication even now with fresh articles every month. 132 issues she produced in her lifetime. She has written 14 volumes of 600 pages each in what has been compiled as the collected works by her nephew Boris Dizerkov, which is also available. Now, imagine a person about a decade before she began writing all this didn't even know the English language. So she had to learn the English language before she could write. And if you read the literature, they are so poetical and so beautiful in their English, you'll be astounded. One book which is worth and easy to read is this book called The Caves and Jungles of Hindustan, which is available in PDF online. In this, she talks about, it's like in a story format where she talks about her travels around India with Colonel Olcott. And this was truly amazing because here, wherever they traveled in India, she also, during her world travel, was always interested in wherever there were practices of magic and occult. So, in all these times, she came across many people who were dangerous, and she was led to both black and white magicians. And it was her master Master Maurya, who protected her, a woman just in her 20s, exploring all this, and that too all over the world alone. So while she was in India, there are many stories about which are written in this book, The Caves and Jungles of Hindustan. One such story is about their travels to the Skarli caves in Maharashtra, where while they were sleeping at night, a tiger came very close to the traveling party. And while it was about to jump at one of the sleeping group, that it suddenly slipped and fell down the mountain, and the next day was found dead. Now, tigers never slip on a mountain, and it is said that Gulab Singh, who was none other than her own master Maurya, who was also part of the party, had done something occult which caused the tiger to slip and fall to his death. So that's how this master continued to protect her. There was another instance where in Udaipur near Malwa, these Bagh caves they were exploring. The Bagh caves were entered via the entrance at the bottom of a mountain, and when you entered the cave, at the ceiling of the cave there was a hole through which you could enter to another cell on top of the that area, and then there was another hole in the ceiling of that cave. So there were cell over cell over cell in stories, with each cell being entered from the roof of the cell below, and they had entered the fourth cell. They were at the fourth level where there was no air, and HPB fainted. Now, these holes which are there in the ceiling were just very small, and people had to squeeze through it. So they wondered how they would, the party who had reached the fourth cell and HPB having fainted, HP Blavatsky, we call her HPB. HPB had, how would they take her out? Suddenly, from nowhere, Gulab Singh, who had not been walking with them at that point, appeared from nowhere and helped to push her out. And that's how she protected him. In the story, she calls him Gulab Singh, but he was actually Master Maurya. Now, she was a dynamo for energy. While in America, in New York, she stayed at a working women's hostel, and she made numerous friends there. She was a very kind soul. And this is what they said about her. They said, in mental or physical dilemma, you would instinctively appeal to her, for you felt her fearlessness, her unconventionality, her great wisdom, and hearty goodwill, her sympathy with the underdog. Now, she had a fiery temper. That was one thing. And Alcott himself asked the master why they could not calm her down, for which the master said such a course would lead to her death by apoplexy. The body was vitalized by a fiery and impetuous spirit, one which from childhood brooked no restraint, and if vent were not allowed for that excessive corporeal energy, the result must be fatal. Now, her energy and curiosity not only drove her to research occult and psychic things all over the world, she also had to try her businesses, her hand at various businesses, because there were times when she ran out of money, and her father at one point had passed away in Russia while she was in America, and there was no way to know that and to access his money. So she ended up having to support herself by making artificial flowers, using chemical processes over real flowers and selling them in New York. She also was a good artist. She designed visiting cards. She made ornamental leather and did needlecraft to sell. While she was at Russia, she went into a business of selling walnut logs, and she was in Germany for a while in 1885 87, and there she made this kind of ink which was much more superior than the ink prevalent then. She set up a factory for that. She also tried farming in America. After father passed away, he left her a legacy with the money with which she bought some land, and she even tried farming in New York, Long Island. She was always a good writer, so she used to contribute to both Russian and English papers and receive some funds from that. Also, she translated in Russian Darwin's Origin of Species, and she was a brilliant pianist. So she gave concerts in both England and Europe, and at one point even thought of making it into a profession. But eventually, her work lay in setting up the Theosophical Society and writing all that literature for which the Theosophical Society is uh, the vehicle to transmit all her knowledge and all her wisdom. Now, she also had other masters. Now, we know that these masters were part of the Great White Brotherhood. These masters are spread all over the world and exist even now. They are the protectors of humanity, and whenever and wherever possible, they influence the minds of the leaders and tried to change the self-destroying uh, activities of humanity. She also, while she was at Tibet, had to learn not only English but the secret language of the adepts called Senzar, which is now unknown. That language, it is a language which is in which colors and sounds and shapes are used. Now that language she had to learn because later on, when she was writing The Isis Unveiled, many other adepts would communicate to her in this language, and she needed to know that language. She also started, while she was in Egypt, she wanted to start a society. She called it Society Spirit, where she collected a lot of mediums to just research on this whole phenomena of spiritualism. But within 2 weeks, the society was disbanded because she found most of the mediums are frauds. So there were some lesser known facts about HPV. She had adopted a crippled child, a hunchback called Yuri in 1858. He was an illegitimate child of a Baron Mayendorf and his mistress who had made HPV swore not to reveal the true parents of the child. HPV took the child to Bologna, Italy to find cures for the child, but the child died prematurely. She also married a second time while in Philadelphia to an immigrated Russian named MC Bettinelli, who was infatuated with her and threatened suicide. Already there had been two suicides by two other people while she was in the master's ashram in Tibet. So she felt compelled to marry Bettinelli, who promised not to have a real marriage, that it would be a platonic marriage. But within 3 4 months, he demanded the activities of a marriage, and she was so appalled. She later on managed to get her divorce from him in 1878 with William Conjudge, who's one of the third founders of the Theosophical Society. Now, she could do something called precipitation, which is a way of solidifying matter, astral matter. So, with precipitation, in one incident, which is written in the esoteric Buddhism and the occult world, these two books are also can be read, written by A.P. Sinnett, also available online, in which he narrates about the various occult phenomena that HPB herself produced, one of which was producing this teacup and saucer, which you see on the left, which even now one can see in the Theosophical Society at Adyar in that museum, which he produced occultly. This is done by a method called precipitation, where the etheric or astral components of anything can be solidified and made solid. She also could precipitate paintings, where you see one in the middle here, and the last one here is a precipitation of, on the rightmost, is Thiruvalluvar, the very famous Tamil poet. Now, HPB narrates that this ability, the psychic gift of precipitation, was something which most of the lamas and monks in Tibet knew and were able to do. So she relates a story of how a poor traveling Bukhini once asked HPB why she was carrying a bunch of dead flowers, to which HPB said why the flowers were freshly plucked. Then the Bukhini said they were all dead when compared to the flowers that grow in eternal light. The bhikkhuni then took one flower from HPB's bunch, kept it on her lap, gathered materials from the air around the flower, and soon a vapor appeared, and then the most beautiful, radiant copy of the same flower in ethereal beauty appeared floating in the air in front of the bhikkhuni. Now, this is the skill that she herself, HPB herself, had. Now all these things happened. She had all these psychic gifts. She was writing in English, etc. But if you read the literature, you'll find that there is enormous references to various histories, science, and religions. And how did she know all that information? This kind of learning she had through the master in 1875, when she was severely ill with rheumatism, and the doctors said that her leg had to be amputated because it was gangrened. She refused to let it be gangrened. She said, "I'd rather die all whole." But finally, the master sent somebody, and she was healed. But since then, the master actually overtook her body, and her personality would disappear. She wrote to her sister, Vera Jellyhosky, "Several times a day, beside me, there is someone else, quite separable from me, present in my body. I never lose consciousness of my personality. What I feel is as if I were keeping silent, and the other one, the lodger, who is in me, was speaking with my tongue. He evidently knows everything that is going on, even to the thoughts of other people, and makes me express his knowledge. Sometimes I feel he overshadows the whole of me, simply entering like a kind of volatile essence, penetrating all my pores and dissolving in me. Then we who are unable, who are then we too are able to speak to other people, and then I begin to understand and remember sciences and languages, everything he instructs me in, even when he is not with me anymore." So this is how we get to understand the extraordinary knowledge that HPB showed in her skills as an editor for the Theosophist and Lucifer, that she could discourse on all subjects from Sanskrit to Vedanta, from Kabbalah to Christianity. So the master literally taught her everything while speaking through her, and she had the intellect to remember everything. So it was extraordinary. And she also wrote to Vera, uh, her sister. She said, "I always recognize and know the master and often talk to him without seeing him. How is it that he hears from me everywhere, and that I also hear his voice across seas and oceans 20 times a day?" So it was the masters who sent her for transmitting the knowledge that they have. And if you have any sort of interest in theosophy, it would be good to start with the key to theosophy, to understand what is theosophy, what is the basis of theosophy. It is truly wonderful. Once you know it, you will feel enormous support, and to understand what this universe is and what is the position of man in this universe. Now, one thing that I personally find very beautiful about HVB is her hands. She had really beautiful sculpted hands. They looked as if they were made to create beauty. Long, rounded, pointed fingers, and she was extremely beautiful in her inner soul. Is what I feel when I see her hands. Her life had was very tough. She had many physical ailments. She was full of. It was all difficult for her. Many people criticized her because of her. There were so many elements in her past: adopting a child, her second marriage, the dissolution of her first marriage, her travels all over, and her research in occult that itself put a shadow of doubt in people's minds. But today, this year, we celebrate 150 years of the society she founded, and I think it is time that people knew the real HPB, the true Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the giant genius of an intellect, who could write more than 10,000 pages in her lifetime. And even now, her books are read. And just to give you an example, it was in The Secret Doctrine that she predicted that the atom is infinitely divisible. At that time, they thought the atom was like a billiard ball, and it was the smallest particle in the universe. Today, we know that there are even there's literally a universe inside every atom. So such things were predicted in her book, and there is enormous understanding that one can get. Colonel Olcott, who was the other founder of the Theosophical Society, as a tribute to her after her death, wrote, HPB's enthusiasm was a flame at which all our theosophists lit their torches, an example which stirred one's blood like the sound of a war trumpet. It is no wonder that I have loved her as a friend, prized her as a teacher, and forevermore kept her memory sacred. So, the whatever has been said here has been taken from the various biographies of HPB. One of them is The Extraordinary Life and Influence of Helena Blavatsky by Sylvia Cranston. Then The Personal Memoirs of H.P. Blavatsky by Mary Keff, and When Daylight Comes by Howard Murfitt. All this can be found online. And with this, I end this talk. Thank you.